Firstly, something to keep at the back of your mind as you take part this morning. Now, during this webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you some ideas that I have on thinking, on our feet in this case, and also on communication, on feelings, they always turn up in these webinars, and on how to deal with the real stuff that we have to deal with at work. The stuff that happens to all of us most weeks or even days. So my nightmare scenario is that you walk away from this webinar thinking, that was interesting, and I really like the drawings as well. For me, the most important thing is that you actually go away and play with this stuff. And in order to do that with any confidence, maybe bring to mind the sorts of situations and people that you're having to deal with, and think about yourself a little bit whilst we're going through the material this morning. I will try and leave a few pauses for you to call to mind your own situation, your own psyche, as it were, if that doesn't sound too deep. The second thing is that the format here means that I'm really necessarily talking at you. This isn't normally how I work. Normally, for us, it's about working with whatever is happening in the room. So this isn't necessarily didactic, but hopefully we can break that up a bit as you interact and you send me questions, and certainly at the end. So let me tell you how it's going to go this morning. Okay, so first of all, got here about 30 minutes of material for you, and then we're going to have a Q&A session, and that will be, as I said, around about 10 o'clock, 10:05. And then a small summary here. And then I will hope to finish that by 10:15 on the dot. If there are any extra questions left over, I will come back after 10:15, or I'll just stick around. If you can stick around, your diary allows that, that's absolutely fantastic. But I guarantee that I will answer all your questions and respond to all your queries and thoughts. So that's how this morning is going to pan out. So firstly, I'd like to open it up to you really, and to ask you, what is thinking on your feet to you? What do you understand by thinking on your feet? So if you would like to have a think now and type it into the questions pane, and I'm going to shout some of these out as you let us have your thoughts. What is thinking on my feet? What does it mean to you? Ben is saying, being put on the spot, responding immediately, making quick, prompt decisions, reacting quickly, says Claire B. John W, being able to respond in the moment. Kate, getting to the heart of the issue without being sidetracked or railroaded by others. Katrina M, responding quickly. Julia, oh hello Julia, lovely to see you there. Dealing with situations in the moment. Julia is a bit of a star, and I'll bring her in a bit later, maybe not actually on the mic unless she wants to, but I'm really delighted that you're here, Julia. Here we are, Beverly giving the right answer straight away. Sally, getting to the point quickly. Hilary, being able to come up with an answer to a question you don't know the answer to. Good one. Sarah, ability to deal with the unknown in that instance. Fiona, being able to react quickly to a changing situation or conversation. Pat, responding to a question or area about things you haven't thought about previously. John, thinking fast. Jeff, good morning, Jeff. Getting an answer back, I guess back then, right in the moment, rather than thinking of it later. Yes, very frustrating. You will be familiar with that one. I know I am. Not saying too much, says Diana. Fiona, problem solving in meetings. Claire, showing vulnerability if not adept on the subject. I like that one a lot, Claire, and that has a particular use, and I'm going to try and remember to bring that back into the room in a minute, or in about 20 minutes. Victoria, coming up with a good answer, even when we do not know the right answer. Here we go, Julia, I knew you'd come up with a gem. Julia, well, I'm going to mention you by name anyway because I'm going to plug your book. Julia Knight, but people tend to associate the phrase with being put on the spot. Good one. Not being put on the spot, and I'll explain hopefully later. Being able to reply with gravitas and without hesitation. Cheryl reckons without hesitation. It's a good thought, and most of us think that that is the case, but maybe we can shake that particular possibility, or what do you think of that? Okay, I'm going to take a couple more. Ben says, giving an answer which will make the questioner feel satisfied straight away. I like that one. Interesting. Again, keep that one in your head. And Anita, finally, providing quick fire information. Oh, I can't resist. I'm going to call the other ones, a couple of other ones out. Pauline W, being able to respond with no prior warning. I like that. That's great. Thank you so much for all your thoughts. Now, let me get onto what my definition is. Well, I think it's a two-step thing. And I break things into steps. So if you've worked with me before, if we've spoken, you know that I do like to break these rather incidental, accidental moments down, because I believe that we, as even brainy Homo sapiens as we are, we have an extremely difficult time under pressure. We're not at our best, and more about that in a second. So, as I said, I think it's a two-step gig. And the first step, well, I'm going to make it really simple. It's a sort of an A leading to B. Now, the A bit is to do with decision. Here at A, there is a decision to be made. And at B, here, this is where we do the creating. When we mix these two things up, and we think we have to create on the spot without any pause, without any hesitation, that's when it leads to R. Now, yes, R, what the hell's R, Paul? Okay, we've all been in this one where we are standing there, our brain says, I know I should be able to come up with an answer. I'm now becoming increasingly embarrassed. I don't know what to do. Just say something. And then we hear ourselves gabbling some nonsense that we really don't want to be associated with. Now, if we're lucky, something good comes in at the end. So about the fifth thing we come up with starts to sound like common sense, or even rather clever creative stuff. Bear that in mind in about 15 minutes' time. So if we want to avoid the rabbit situation, we need to make a decision about what's going on before we try and create anything. Now, before we get into any of this, I want you to start to think about now, and you may have already decided, I don't know how old some of you are or how young you are, whether you're at the beginning of your career, at the end, you may have already decided how you want to be, how you want to be seen. And it's not an easy question, because what it means is the answer to that will dictate the way that you behave in your organization. And sometimes it feels like a career decision. In fact, I bumped into Jackie in the corridor the other day of her beautiful headquarters building, and she talked about having made a career-saving change of heart, a change of decision. And some things do feel really, in the moment she was having a conversation and she decided to do it a different way. Way to go, Jackie. But sometimes things weigh heavily, and we need to decide on how we're going to approach it. And sometimes it takes an amount of bravery, but a conscious decision is required. So I'm asking you now, in general, do you find yourself shaping situations or being shaped by them? How would you like it to be? Are you the sort of person who's prepared, like the little chap on the screen, to do your best under difficult circumstances? Or are you going to change the circumstances so that you can do your best? This is about how you operate. Do you operate best under pressure, under the rock, or on top of it? And being under pressure, or having mastered it, what does it do to your confidence? What we're talking about here, this thinking on your feet business, is somewhat about confidence, building confidence. But it's also being prepared to, as one author whose name currently escapes me, to feel the fear and do it anyway. To actually get comfortable with fear. or that feeling that we so often label as fear, but maybe isn't. So where's the balance, and how do you achieve it in the room? How do you get enough sort of frisson, enough excitement in your body, in your mind, to get you thinking, to get you excited, but not so much that you feel burdened by it? Where is your balance? Now, if you've been hanging around me for long enough, you will be familiar with this particular diagram. This is a circuit diagram. Like every circuit, it has a circuit breaker. Now, inside you probably know, even if you've not read the papers for the last 5 years, you'll know that we're getting pretty cute with frequency resonance imaging, blah, blah, fMRI. And we know that our brains have millions, billions of circuits. These two, or this one that I'm representing, has a couple of light bulbs. This one here represents our ability to think. This one here represents our ability to communicate. Couldn't think of the word there for a second. That was interesting. That was an instance of my circuit momentarily going out. So when our circuits are going all right, in other words, there's just enough emotional power running around for us to be excited but not flooded, everything's fine. But as the amount of energy, and by which I mean feelings, go round and round and round, then at some point your circuit breaker and mine will blank out. It will be at different points on the continuum. Some of us can take more than others. But the point is to find out how much you can take. When your circuit breaker goes, you can't think and you can't communicate. And the idea is just to have enough to get you excited, but not so much that you don't know what to do next. Okay, so how do we make a good fist of actually reacting in the moment? Now, as I've already mentioned very, very briefly, there are a couple of steps to this, and I'm going to take you through these at lightning speed. So the first thing you need to do is to actually decide. You need to decide about taking control of the situation, or how much you want to take control of the situation that you need to perform in. And there are two sets of things that need managing here. The stuff in your head and the stuff that's going on in the room. In other words, the other people. As I said, you can create the situation that you want to be in, or at least one that you're taking part in with your eyes open, fully aware and somewhat in control of your circuit and therefore your brain. So the first thing to spot in your decision making is this what it seems? The person who's asking me to think on my feet, perhaps with a challenge or with a question, is it a genuine challenge? Are they really happy and engaged and wanting me to succeed? Or is it really this person here who's wanting to have a dig at me, or doesn't like the idea, or doesn't like the way the conversation is going? If it's this guy here or girl here who is not happy, then what we need to do there is totally different to thinking on our feet. It's a different thing, and I'm going to come to it in a second when I describe how does this sound in the room. The second thing we need to ask about is, am I prepared to play the game as it is? In other words, if somebody has put out a challenge to me and I think, yeah, I can do that. I've got a couple of really cool ideas because it happens to be my pet topic, perhaps, or because I like them, or because I'm relaxed, or for whatever incidental reason my light bulbs are fully on, then I accept the challenge without further ado. I decide to take responsibility for the quality of my answers because I know they're going to be good or good enough. Or I may decide that I need to change the game. I need to do it a different way. This isn't football anymore. This is basket foot or whatever. And I'm going to say in a minute, less than a minute, how we actually bring this about in the room. So decide on the situation. What am I really looking at here? Am I going to play the game as it's being presented to me? In other words, take up the challenge because I feel I can, or do I have to change the game? So that's the first bit. It's a totally distinct step in itself, and it only takes a second. you will know very quickly where you are, largely based on how you feel. Okay, how does that sound in the room? Actually, I've slightly skipped. How does this sound in the room? This one is empathy. You sound. You seem. And then the name of the feeling that you think they're having. Calling out the feeling of the other person helps them to understand that you've taken them seriously. In other words, you've picked up the hint and aren't just jumping about like a cat on a hot tin roof, which actually they may have wanted. Dare I say it. But they really realise, oh my gosh, she was really paying attention. I'm not going to get around them. And in fact, their respect for us increases if we spot where they are. So then it's not a creative conversation anymore. It's a I'm paying attention to you conversation now. This middle one is, okay, well, I'm just going to say a couple of things that pop into my head. Don't worry about the first answers. I'm just going to come up with some ideas and stop me when you hear something that you like. Or something like that. And then you'll be prepared to spout total nonsense, confident in the knowledge that you will come up with something interesting within the next 30, 45 seconds, a minute. For this one here, you need to feel absolutely on side and happy. For this one here, if you think, no, I need to change the game, I'm too much on edge, the person is too senior, I don't know what I'm doing here, then you might hear yourself saying something like, this needs some proper thinking, and that's not, I think, what we can do here. Or this question that you have for me deserves a proper answer, some proper thought. Another game changer, so that one is, I'm not going to do it here. Another game changer, which is, I'm going to do it here, but I'm going to change the terms of the game, is, okay, John, how good or accurate or instantly usable do you need my response to be? Because if you want a brilliant response, I'm not going to come up with it here. But I can give you some ideas off the top of my head. Or another alternative, which is, again, I can give you an answer, but it might not be the best one. It might sound like, okay, this is my answer. This is my 20% confidence answer. This is my 60% answer. The percentage referring to how confident I am in it. So those are how you actually let the other person know that you're making a decision in the room. I'm just going to pause here in the material just to see. I know there's some questions coming up. Gary said, did Peter Drucker touch upon this in the Harvard Business Review, readers versus listeners? Gosh, Gary, you're way better read than I am. But if you have the reference, I'd love to see it. I have a one copy of the Harvard Business Review that I think I was given once, and I keep it out to make people think that I read it. But I'd like the reference if you have that. Kate is saying, I shape my destiny. Which is, I guess, in response to, are you prepared to change what's going on inside the room? Okay, so I'm going to hide the Q&A pane again for myself. Right, so now here's the creating bit. So this is the bit that we tend, if we don't know better, to jump straight into thinking that that's what we should be doing. So how does this creative bit? Well, again, I've broken it into my steps because that's how my brain works, and I hope it works for you too. So the first thing is to take the pressure off. Now, as I said, we do need some pressure, but we mustn't have so much that we can't function. So a way to take the pressure off in the room is to say, I don't know where this is going, but I'm sure we're going to get there. Which is another way of saying, I'm going to come up with a load of rubbish at first, and we all are, but that's okay because we'll get to the answer eventually. So it's kind of taking off the performance pressure. Or I'm going to throw some ideas out there. Something will come of it. So I suppose it's a kind of caveat to say, let's get going on this and the creativity will come. The ideas will come. And there are other devices. And Julia, who is something of an expert with improv, will, I'm sure, have lots of other interesting tricks up her sleeve that she and her partner use when they are running these workshops for people on improv. Now, the second one here, and again, this is something Julia and some of you will be very familiar with, is to actually access the subconscious. Now, this is something that I thought was very nicely put in Julia's book, which I'll plug in a minute. And this is about creating barriers to actually make ourselves creative. Now, what happens is our minds, our brains, humans, we tend to, because we are programmed to spare energy, to be sparing, to be efficient, we will, like sheep, mentally, intellectually use the same well-worn paths. And in fact, what we really need to do is to be able to force ourselves off those paths so that we can have new ideas. So the game turns out to be one of putting barriers across these well-worn paths to force ourselves to go elsewhere. And it is in the act of putting up these barriers that we have to get creative. And we come up with lots of different ways of getting to the objective. And that's what creativity is. It's coming up with something novel that can be implemented, perhaps, or at least gets us unstuck from a current situation that we don't want anymore. So how can we create these barriers? In the room, we do it with phrases like, if we had to do it today, what would we do? Or if we had to make it really simple, in other words, if we had to explain this to a 6-year-old, what would we do? How would we put it? What would the idea be? So putting constraints, intellectual constraints, artificial constraints on our normal path of ideas makes us creative, or at least it gives us access to our subconscious. And our subconscious is running all the time, but often in the background, and we just don't bring it out to play enough. And this is a trick, one of the tricks or ways of doing this. Other places, other things you can do, they do in ad agencies, they have huge expensive picture books that their creators flick through when they're stuck. You take a walk in the park, you can go running, you can have a shower. I often come up with my best ideas in the shower, but I'm not going to go any further with that one. Keep a notebook, well, perhaps keep a notebook in the shower if you can. So writing these ideas down, listening very carefully when our conscious mind is distracted. That's where the creativity comes from. And that's what we're trying to do when we're thinking on our feet. Okay, and the third step is be prepared to talk rubbish. At least at first, because it is in this rubbish phase that we are occupying our conscious mind, and our subconscious is coming up with some real rubbish at first. That's absolutely fantastic and fair play. It's absolutely essential, in fact, to getting things moving. Let the pressure off. Create an obstacle for your brain to overcome with its subconscious, not its conscious part, and then be prepared to talk rubbish for a bit. Okay, getting better at it. Here we go. How do we get better at it? Well, the obvious way is obviously to practice. But one of the things that we do when we practice, it's not just practicing like times table. It's trying these things often enough for our neural pathways to get ever thicker as we practice a particular thing. And incidentally, that also includes nasty things like getting angry with people. If we practice getting angry or get into a behavioral routine, we strengthen, we broaden, we enrich those neural pathways, we multiply them, and we get really good. So you get better at what you practice. Also, it's about building good habits. And one of the good habits, and I've been using it for years, but I didn't know why until I read Julia's book, and that is yes and instead of yes but. I've often said to people, I've made the word but illegal, but it's interesting what it does to creative processes. And I've even been practicing it in my own language, in my own conversations with my family in the last 10 days or so. And it does make a difference. And of course, if I haven't mentioned it before, practice. Again, strengthening those neural pathways. And get good at accessing your subconscious with creating barriers. These barriers are really the weird things that actually make us better and better at coming up with cookie but brilliant ideas. So barriers like, how could we make it worse? That's something I've been doing for years, and again, that turns up in Julia's book. If we were to do only one thing, what would it be? If money were no object, what would we do? If it had to be done today, what would we do? So creating barriers to make us think on our feet. And of course, as I've been plugging already, but here it is that Harry and Julia have written this book. You might want to dip into it, buy it definitely, give it to friends, buy hundreds of copies for your company. But seriously, it's not, as I said to Julia, I don't normally buy business books because I think most of them are total rubbish. But this one is full of really practical stuff. Not everything will be for you or will fit into your culture at work. But this one has certainly given me some ideas. And it's also made me realise why I do certain things. It's given me some background knowledge to some of the habits that I hope are good that I already had. One of the main things that this is really about is becoming much, much happier at living on the edge, or what feels like the edge. And the more risky we're prepared to be, the more we're prepared to do crazy things like, I don't know, stand up, go to Speaker's Corner and talk, or even stand up when you don't need to in front of a group of people that you know and say stuff. Tell jokes in front of your friends, things that you wouldn't normally do because they feel interpersonally risky. The more you do, the more you're going to reinforce the notion, the belief, the reality that you are not going to die. You're not going to fall in a heap and be seen as a total idiot. It's thinking on your feet, I think, is about getting hold of the fact that actually you can do this stuff without actually perishing. And that's what our fear of thinking on our feet is telling us. It's saying, don't do it, you're going to die. And you're not. And we don't. And practicing that will help us to realise, will help us to retrain our brain, particularly our amygdala and the hippocampus and all those naughty little parts of the brain that give us nice feelings, but also give us the feelings of trepidation that really, when it comes to thinking on your feet, you absolutely do not want. Okay, so this is the moment for some thoughts and reactions from you. It would be great to hear and to read what you're thinking. I'm just going to open up the Q&A pane again and see if you have any questions. If you do, type them in. I'm just scrolling down now. Okay, Ben says, I think it helps to quickly put the listener at ease with how you give a response. Good one. Yes, I think making the other person feel relaxed, Ben, as you say, is a great way of changing the dynamic in the room. Okay, thank you for that one, Ben. Petra, I beg your pardon, Petra. Rubbish requires confidence that the others won't lose respect, and isn't that what stops many people from going down that route, which needs trust first? Good one, Petra. Yes, it does. And I suppose, and this is part of the big sort of, what am I prepared to do? How far out am I prepared to stick my neck? Is, am I going to shape the room? Am I going to shape the action? Am I going to influence how people feel and think right then and there? And being prepared to talk rubbish is a brave thing to do. I agree. But I think it does inspire confidence when we do it willingly. And I think that's the thing here, is doing it on purpose. I know I'm going to talk rubbish, but bear with me. Thanks, Petra. Gary says, externalizing stuff is key. When you read it back, different pathways in your brain are being used. Eureka moments have taken quite a bit of time to develop. You don't just realise that your brain has been working in the background. It's very powerful. Police use the externalizing techniques very effectively. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I think what you're driving at, Gary, is that actually we've been, because our subconscious is always going, we've been thinking lots of brainy things for a long time, and our creativity and our creative fixes are there waiting to be accessed. So actually sometimes thinking on your feet is bringing stuff into the room which has taken a long time to develop, but it's doing it in a way which is spontaneous or is an interesting combination with the problem at hand. Oh, and Julia says there's an ebook too. Yes, but it doesn't cost as much, Julia. So get the soft copy. I definitely did, and it's well worth it. Okay, Ben says, we learn nothing from success. We need to fail to improve. Gosh, how right you are. And it's painful. And now at the ripe old age of 51, I really see how the really torrid bits were by far the most instructive. Flogging encyclopedias was definitely a low point. Standing in supermarkets on Saturday morning in Grantham in Lincolnshire, asking people to enter a free draw was horrible. But I know it certainly made me very creative. Fiona says, any tips for creative brainstorming when you have very limited knowledge of a subject? That's definitely one for the book, Fiona. The whole brainstorming piece and getting creative, which is really brainstorming for me, has a lot to do with improv, is definitely about finding ways to wake people up, wake up their subconscious, get them thinking. So I really do strongly suggest you get the book. I promise you I'm not on a cut, but I think you'll be jolly chuffed. And that's particularly, it's sort of topic agnostic. Ben, you'll never learn to swim if you don't get in the water. Absolutely. I have a friend who never learned to swim, but he hates getting in the water. And interesting, so actually a really interesting one. He is 51 years old, my best friend of all time. We've known each other since we were 13. He's run companies and corporations and flies all over the world and lives in first-class lounges, but he's never learned to swim because he's scared of water. Very good one. Eleonora, how do you apply this in different environments, different audiences? Would you be happy to actually open up your microphone, Eleonora? Nicola will open up your mic if you can. Maybe you can't. Oh, here we go. Here you are.
We're having different situation in different audiences, because you might have to deal with completely different people.
Yes.
How do you manage yourself with the different audience, basically? Yes.
Is there an audience you have in mind where you think, this really wouldn't work, Paul?
Yes, when you have people who are not listening.
Ah, okay. So that's a completely different situation, and that really is one for empathy. So that's back to the decision, Eleonora, of this isn't a thinking situation. This is a troubleshooting thing. I'm going to pay attention to them. So the audience who's not listening, or the people who say, you seem distracted, you don't look very interested, because you need to bring them back in the room first. You need to engage them. And the best way to do that to people is to actually pay them more attention to find out what's not working for them. Okay, we're just coming up for the witching hour. One more. Ryan asks, how do you get people to ask the first question? The majority of briefings I attend end with a silent Q&A at the end. Yes. Well, actually, interestingly, Ryan, I have. That's why I put thoughts and reactions, because if I ask people any questions, I get that, which is horrible. So if you do get that, Ryan, let's deal with reality. If you do get that, one way of dealing with it is to actually talk about what it's like to be there without any questions. So I do that. Oh gosh, this is the silence that I dread. I guess what I just said to you made total sense. And then as you're talking, what you might find is that you get reactions, people smiling, someone frowning, someone raising their eyebrows, and then you pick on them mercilessly. Oh, it looks like you have a question, whether you think so or not. And then they say, oh, no, I didn't. It was just blah, 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 blah. And you think, haha, there we go. And then somebody else, in the safety of the noise, will come in with a question. So that's where I would go, Ryan. Start talking and point out the reaction. Actually, empathise with the audience again. It's another one, as Eleonora actually prompted me to say. Hopefully that's good enough, Ryan. Okay, I'm going to round off now so that we can finish absolutely on the dot of 1:15, and then we can come back and do more Q&A in a few moments. Okay, so here is your grand summary. And the first thing is you need to decide. You need to decide what you're actually dealing with in the room. Is it somebody who's being hostile either towards you or towards the topic, or is it a genuine inquiry, a genuine prompt for you to think on your feet and be creative? The second thing you need to do is to decide whether it's a game you want to play as it is. If you're feeling energized and excited and confident, just go for it. Just start spouting ideas and think on your feet. If, however, you think, I don't like the look of this, I don't want the pressure, then change the game. Change it into something that you want, either by delaying completely and saying, I'm going to come back to you because this deserves a better answer than I'm capable of coming up with right now. And incidentally, as soon as you say that, I bet you a penny to a pinch of salt, you will then come up with an idea. So you can either delay completely, and as I say, I think you'll probably come up with an idea anyway as soon as you've done that because you've taken the pressure off. Or you can say, well, look, yeah, okay, let's come up with some ideas, but let's do a joint effort. Or, okay, ignore the first 5 things I say because I'm just going to trot some stuff out straight off the top of my head. Or, as I've done fairly recently with somebody, which was really funny, I said, I have no idea. And as soon as I said I had no idea, I came up with 3 ideas. So those sorts of things do happen when we are changing the game. Changing the game, I suppose, is another way of summoning your subconscious to wake up and get cracking on your behalf. Okay, the second thing that I would ask you to consider is taking the pressure off. That's the really important bit of being creative, which is to make it fun, to make it a game that you want to play. And that is part of being able to give yourself the permission to spout total, complete and utter rubbish. And that is a pressure relief as it is. And belief, once we start to believe, that's the biggest part of the success here. We all come up with good ideas when we feel like it. The trick here is to get ourselves in a position where we feel like it more often, very quickly. And that's the real trick. And it can be done with practice, of course. We can practice feeling like it as a kind of professional capability. Okay, so I've got Nicola's drawn my attention to the fact that Samantha K, Samantha, has a question. So I'm just going to get the questions pane detached. Here we go. We're in questions injury time, which is always great fun. So I think we're going to hear from Samantha here. Well, we do. Sarah, is it all about being prepared to take a risk? Yes, it is, Sarah S. Partially. It's also about realizing that taking risks isn't deadly. It's not going to damage you. It might feel awkward, but the awkwardness is the thing that sometimes stops us from being at our best, from doing something really cool and amazing. So it's about being able to live with the awkwardness and learning that feeling awkward and on the edge is absolutely fine. Sort of making friends with not feeling very good. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. Hilary, what if the answer required is a fact, e.g. a number that you don't know? Well, I think from my perspective, Hilary, you've put the question, your answer in the question. It's a number that I don't know. And that is the most honest thing you can say. You can say, look, I'm embarrassed. I don't know all of those numbers, and that's definitely one I don't know, and I'm not going to chance it now. So I think honesty is also cathartic, and it also helps us. It's a decision. We've made a decision. I'm not going to give you the answer, and I'm not going to blag it because it's too important. So telling the truth is a great way to decide to take charge of the situation. Hopefully that's good enough, Hilary. Ben, are there different techniques when we speak over the phone or when we are in the room? I'm pondering that now. My instant answer sort of my 80% answer is no, it's exactly the same. Although on the phone, you probably, obviously, you know, Ben, excuse me, we have to give more signposts anyway, especially for silence. And silence is much underused. And it only takes a couple of seconds to come up with something really cool on the spur of the moment on our feet. So asking for silence and using it properly, I mean, really using it, not just sitting there feeling tense and thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I've got to come up with something now. But say, hang on, give me a second, the line's going to go silent. And then looking around the room, that actually helps as well. You know, going around the room, looking for random objects and naming them. That's another one of the things that comes up in Julia's and Harry's book. You look around and you enumerate objects, you point to them, and it gets your brain going. So I think the same face-to-face as on the phone, Ben. Fiona, sometimes the pressure to come up with something on the spot is a killer. Stalling for time by asking questions, what do you want to achieve, etc., helps you to buy time and gives you more information. Plus, everyone relaxes when better ideas do come to the front. Yeah, absolutely. So really, I could say, being a bit more generous than you are, Fiona, it's not really stalling. It's actually, you know, doing a proper job of scoping what the problem is. And I guess maybe the difference is, Fiona, that we can tell when people are stalling because they come out with that question and there doesn't seem to be a tone of interest behind it. So appreciative inquiry, really meaning the question, you know, so what are you actually wanting to achieve? And another one is, how are you going to use my answer? So if I come up with some stuff, what do you plan to do with it? Because that's also asking them, okay, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to take it as the truth? Am I going to splash it up on a company notice board? Am I going to put it on the website? Am I going to make a major decision because of something that Fiona's just said, an idea she came up with in the corridor by the water cooler? So I don't see it as stalling for time. I see it as priming myself to give a really high quality answer, or an answer at least that we all understand the quality of. Here we are, Ben. I find that often that people can be more aggressive over the phone, but are lovely in person. That's interesting. What are you doing to them over the phone, Ben? I think, if I think about now, me on the phone, yes, I think if I'm examining my own behaviour, Ben, which is what I'm doing, sort of staring up to the ceiling, I'm thinking, yeah, actually, if I give someone a harder time on the phone if I'm after something or I'm unhappy with something they've done. Yeah, so I think you're right. So what's the learning from that, Ben? Maybe it's don't take people's attacks on the phone so seriously. Could that be it? Be prepared to shrug it off. Try not to feel intimidated, or if I'm feeling intimidated, say, ouch, make a joke of it. Or empathise. Empathise with the other person's feeling. You sound annoyed with me. You sound frustrated. And then they can explain themselves, and maybe that will diffuse any extra telephonic rage they might be suffering from. But thank you for that one, Ben. Another thought was, or maybe more defensive. Yeah, I think you're right. People maybe do have display more emotion because it's anonymous. We can't see the damage we're doing. The old Milgram electric shock experiment. And yes, I think we probably we get defensive as well. So empathy on the phone, top notch. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute blast. I've really enjoyed it. I enjoyed preparing for it as well. I've learned a lot. And if you want Julia's book, go ahead and get it. It's well worth it. Here it is. Listen, Say Yes, Commit. That's by Harry Puckering and Julia Knight. Go ahead and get it. I'm not on a cut. Take care and have a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye.